Steve Jobs submitted his resignation to Apple's board on 17 September 1985. Over the previous year, he had come under growing pressure as IBM and other companies overtook Apple in the rapidly expanding personal computer market. Yet Jobs was not finished. 12 years later, he would return to Apple and pull it back from the brink of bankruptcy. This is the story of Steve Jobs, the man who revolutionized personal computing. Steve Jobs was born on 24 February 1955 in San Francisco, originally named Abdul Latif Jendali. His father, Abdul Fattah Jendali, was a Syrian political science student at the University of Wisconsin, where he met Joanne Schiebel, a Swiss-German Catholic. When Joanne became pregnant, her father threatened to disinherit her if she married Jendali, so she traveled to San Francisco in early 1955 to give birth and arrange an adoption. The lawyer who was supposed to adopt the child backed out upon learning the baby was a boy, so the child was instead placed with Paul Jobs, a Coast Guard veteran and mechanic, and his wife, Clara, the daughter of Armenian immigrants. They named the boy Stephen Paul Jobs. Although Steve knew from an early age that he was adopted, he always insisted he felt deeply loved by Paul and Clara, who promised Joanne they would set up a college fund for him. Ironically, Joanne later married Jendali anyway after her father died, and the couple had a daughter, Mona, before divorcing. The Jobs family moved to Mountain View in 1959, where Paul set up a workshop and tried to interest his son in mechanics. Steve preferred electronics and worked on small projects with his father. The neighborhood was full of engineers from companies like Lockheed and Hewlett-Packard, shaping Steve's curiosity. At school, he was intelligent but bored, often playing pranks until a fourth-grade teacher inspired him to excel by motivating him with rewards. After the family moved to Los Altos to avoid a troubled school district, Steve flourished academically and socially. In high school, Jobs fell in with older students interested in electronics and music, experimented with psychedelics, and befriended HP engineer Larry Lang, who introduced him to the Hewlett-Packard Explorers Club. There, Steve saw early desktop computers and built projects of his own. One day, he even phoned HP founder Bill Hewlett for parts and received both the parts and a summer job. By age 15, Jobs worked at an electronics store and learned how to buy and resell hardware for profit. He was also taught electronics by former Navy pilot John McCollum, although Jobs' unruliness often irritated his instructor. The most important relationship Jobs formed, however, was with Steve Wozniak, a brilliant engineer 5 years older. The two bonded over electronics, music, and pranks, including one at a school graduation ceremony involving a giant banner of a hand giving the middle finger. In 1971, after reading an article in Esquire, the two Steves built a blue box, a device that allowed free long-distance phone calls by mimicking AT&T tones. They sold around 100 of them before a dangerous encounter with an armed customer ended the business. Jobs later said Apple might never have existed without the confidence the Blue Box project gave them. After a period at Reed College dabbling in Zen Buddhism, experimenting with vegetarian diets, and eventually dropping out, Jobs returned to California in 1974. He worked at Atari, where his unconventional lifestyle alienated some coworkers, though he befriended engineer Ron Wayne. After a trip to India in search of spiritual guidance, Jobs returned to Atari and later worked with Wozniak to design the arcade game Breakout. Jobs received a large bonus for reducing the number of chips used, a bonus he never told Wozniak about, a secret that hurt their relationship years later. In 1975, Wozniak discovered the Altair 8800 and was inspired to build his own personal computer using an affordable MOS technology microprocessor. After successfully testing his prototype in June 1975, he brought it to the Homebrew Computer Club. Wozniak freely shared his designs, but Jobs saw commercial potential and suggested they sell assembled circuit boards. They raised $1,300 and formed Apple Computer on 1 April 1976. Ron Wayne was briefly a partner, but left after 2 weeks in exchange for $800, a decision that later cost him billions. Their first big break came from Paul Terrell of the Byte Shop, who ordered 50 fully assembled computers. Jobs and Wozniak quickly built them in the Jobs family garage. The Apple I sold well enough to fund development of the Apple II, a fully integrated personal computer with a sleek design and innovative power supply. Venture capitalist Mike Markula invested heavily, helped structure the company, and predicted Apple would become a Fortune 500 company within 2 years, a prediction that came true. Apple's IPO in December 1980 made hundreds of employees millionaires. Jobs' stake was worth over $250 million, but he continued to live relatively modestly. Still, his rising fame and demanding personality caused increasing friction within the company. Jobs oversaw innovations inspired by Xerox PARC, where he had seen the first graphical user interface, a revolutionary way to interact with computers using windows, icons, and a mouse rather than text commands. He pushed Apple to integrate these ideas into the Lisa and later the Macintosh. However, his leadership style, intense, autocratic, and often abrasive, alienated engineers and managers. His clashes with colleagues eventually led Apple executives to strip him of operational power. This moment set the stage for the conflict that ultimately forced Jobs to leave Apple in 1985, and for the dramatic return 12 years later that would completely transform the company.